Okay, thank you very much, folks. Um, my name's Jon Hunt. I'm an information security officer at Jisc. My focus is on the education, awareness, and training side of things. So I'm going to talk a bit today about some of the things that we do at Jisc to keep folks informed and protect against things like phishing attacks. Now, as I'm sure you will have seen, in recent weeks, we've had a huge spike in the number of coronavirus-themed phishing attempts and other scams, to the point where this has gone beyond the sort of IT and security press coverage, which always focuses on this kind of thing, breaking right through into the mainstream news coverage as well. So the BBC news website has run a number of articles about this, and there's been a range of advisories and advice and guidance from the likes of the National Cybersecurity Centre, the National Crime Agency, Action Fraud, all those very important organisations. And I think the thing here is that this kind of comes as no particular surprise if you work in security. You know, we are very well aware that this is a technique that criminals use to piggyback on current events, be that disasters or tragedies or other things as well. You know, when new iPhones launch, for example, there's a lot of scams around those. But in this case, it's obviously, if something you're not familiar with, it's quite alarming and distressing. It paints a rather bleak picture of human nature, you know, the way the criminals are exploiting the current anxieties, the current problems, current distress for criminal gain. But I think there is a potential positive here, in that we as a community have an opportunity to raise awareness of the way criminals do this, the fact that this is a habitual tactic that they use. And I'd go as far as to say I think it's almost the case that criminals have perhaps shot themselves in the foot with the huge volume of scams and the attendant coverage there's been as a result. If we can encourage people to anticipate this kind of activity in the light of these current events, it goes a long way towards readying people for them, being prepared to expect them and knowing what to do. What we want people to do is get past that entirely understandable shock and horror and disgust to focus on, well, how do I deal with this? What do I need to do? How do I report it? How do I keep safe? So I think there's a real opportunity sort of to demystify this, to sort of desensationalize it, if that's a word, to surface this as a technique that criminals make use of and encourage people to be ready for it, to expect it, in a way of sort of taking the wind out of people's sails, pulling the rug from beneath the criminals, and hopefully sort of reducing the amount of traction they get as a result. And I think my sort of second point would be that this sort of highlights the difference between, this comes as no surprise to security professionals, between the shock and alarm that the general public might experience of not being aware of this in the past. It highlights their other sort of common misunderstandings and misconceptions about security risks that people have. And that isn't intended as a criticism. We have to remember that security isn't most people's day job. They're doing lots of other things most of the time. But the kinds of things that this highlights is the fact that people think, well, why is anybody going to be interested in me? This isn't, you know, nobody's going to be interested in my account. And I think this is perpetuated by some of the imagery that we frequently see of sort of lone hackers in hoodies tapping away at laptops. And it's misleading because it gives an idea that we're being attacked as individuals by individuals, and that's not the case at all. It's going on an industrial scale. The criminals are indiscriminate. If you've got an online account, you are potentially at risk. So it's very important that we communicate that to people, that people understand that this is a global thing, happens at scale, and you are at risk alongside everybody else. We are commodity, essentially. And I think a related misconception is that people think, well, it's hopeless. There's so much stuff out there. There's so much going on. I'm going to get hacked whatever I do. You know, this is, and sometimes the press coverage feeds into that as well and sensationalizes things. And it's understandable that people feel overwhelmed, that they don't have the skills and expertise to deal with this. But it's actually not true. Things that you can do to protect yourself, managing your passwords properly, making sure you don't reuse them, setting strong ones, ideally using a password manager to set them for you, and setting up things like multi-factor authentication, about which more in a moment. Those things aren't particularly technical. They do take some time and effort to set up, but make a huge difference to your security. So I think we sort of tackle these misconceptions that people have head on, give people the context as well as explain so that they understand the tools they need to use and why they need to use them, to encourage them to develop a sort of security mindset. And I think there's a strong analogy here between how we teach people to drive. We don't teach people to drive by giving them a list of do's and don'ts and simply explaining how the car's controls work. We give them an appreciation of, positioning, managing risk, recognizing other traffic, recognizing conditions. And we need to do the same here because it's obviously a very complex environment. So moving on to the kinds of things that we do at Jisc to try and educate and inform and get people aware. Obviously, there's a very strong focus on developing advice and guidance, as you would expect. We have mandatory information security training, which includes a component around phishing that everybody needs to do as part of their induction when they start at Jisc. And we ask people to revisit that on an annual basis as well. And we do things above and beyond that as well, as you would imagine. So we do things like use the intranet for things like blog posts, additional video resources to go alongside our online training, email updates. Yammer's a good tool for informal updates as well. But what we try and do is share details of actual examples of phishing that we see that get reported to us or that we come across. The idea being that it makes it real, that this is, these aren't examples that we've made up. These are actual messages that have come in to Jisc and that have been reported to us. So it underlines the value of reporting as well. And we've also tried to do some work as well around, there have been some instances, again covered in the press, where some genuine messages have been mistaken for phishing, and why that happens. What can we do to ensure not only that our messages are seen as genuine, but also to throw into relief what's absent in a phishing message. What is it about a phishing message that would be in a genuine email and is missing here? So really that leads on to my next point around this, is that we've done a lot of work as well to encourage reporting, to make reporting quick and easy for people to do, to try and create that kind of virtuous circle where we can use the messages that are reported to us to develop additional advice and training and guidance resources. Good example, we had a flurry of gift card scam emails come in recent months, this kind of thing, an email purporting to be from the chief executive saying, I'm in a meeting, I need you to do me a favor for me, please email me back as soon as possible. When you do, you get asked to go out and buy iTunes gift cards and send the code and all those sorts of things. And what we've done is roll out the report message button in Outlook, so that when you click on a message and you look at it and think, oh, that doesn't look right, there's a simple button in the toolbar to report it to us either as phishing or as junk, or if it's been incorrectly marked as junk, to mark it as not junk. And in doing so, we get a copy of the message as an attachment, so we can do the additional analysis based on the header information. I say we, it's colleagues that do that rather than me. But it's a very quick, easy way to report messages to us. And they also have the option as well to send the details to Microsoft, so it can all go into Microsoft continuing to develop and improve their phishing and spam defenses. But it's really important to, I think, to encourage that kind of virtuous circle where we're basing advice and guidance on the real stuff that we're seeing, and people understand, well, not only are these the signs to look for, this is what a phishing message looks like, I can see that reporting this stuff actually really does make a difference, and it's really important that I do. And finally here, the other hugely important strand is multi-factor authentication. As I mentioned earlier, we rolled this out across Jisc last year. As I'm sure you're aware, the principle here is that if you can access something over the internet, you should really protect it with more than a password. So we've rolled this out across Jisc based on primarily the Microsoft Authenticator app, which was a non-trivial thing to do across Jisc as an organization, but clearly very, very worthwhile. And we've encouraged people as well to use the Authenticator app to set up MFA for their personal accounts as well. So it's a very effective defense against credential theft, because obviously people can't log into an account if they don't have the second factor, even if they manage to get hold of the password somehow. But we do need to be careful that this doesn't protect against everything. So don't give the impression this is a silver bullet, because it doesn't protect against things like malicious attachments, for example, or being used to distribute ransomware or other forms of malware. So again, the context for these, this as a solution is really important. So finally, I think the thing I would say, a bit like the comms I mentioned earlier, there's no single solution to this. The important thing is to have a multi-layered approach. So lots of different communications channels. Some people engage with email, some people prefer blog posts, recognizing you've got to use all those different channels to reach people in different ways. And you need to do lots of different things to provide the levels of protection that are required. And this is very much in keeping with the National Cybersecurity Centre's multi-layered approach that's set out in their guidance. So the training and awareness and guidance is really important. The technical controls like MFA, for example, are really important, and having the mechanisms around reporting quickly and easily, and everybody knowing how to do that is really important as well. And that's me. Thank you all very much.